nostalgia has never meant anything to me. I'm never interested in what we did in the past. I'm interested in what we're doing in the future. It would be really sad if I was still trying to write about being a 20-year-old man in my 50s. So I try and write about the things that concern me now.
Do you want to deliberately avoid politics?
No, I don't want to deliberately avoid politics, but I think it's become increasingly tribal and increasingly toxic, and it's very difficult to talk about.
Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Guru-Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. My guest this week is Brett Anderson, the frontman of Suede, who are releasing their 10th album called Antidepressants and are taking over the Southbank Centre in London for a series of events in September. Now that, of course, will be after a summer of Britpop revival provoked by the Oasis concerts. That whole movement was, of course, something Suede were inescapably associated with, but always a bit disdainful of. Suede remain unmistakable in their sound, but Brett's writing continues to evolve to the times and his age. Never acutely political, it is nonetheless clearly social commentary, and it's a delight to welcome you to the studio.
It's a pleasure to be here, Krishnan.
So you've called this, in fact, there's a track on the album called Broken Music for Broken People.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I sort of feel that society is at kind of a bit of a breaking point at the moment. It feels like we're in a bit of a pressure cooker, and I don't quite know what the next stage is. But I wanted to reflect some of that. I wanted to reflect some of the sort of 21st century angst that kind of like bleeds through into my life and lots of people's lives, I think. And I think as a writer, it's very different from being a journalist. You're not looking for specific questions and specific answers. You're picking up on kind of like your senses are picking up on emotions and things, and it's much more of a kind of a impressionistic view of the world that you're making. So I'm kind of like writing songs is very much about expressing feelings. So I was trying to express some of those feelings.
And what do you think that 21st century angst is? Or where does it come from?
I don't know. I'm not a journalist, so I can't really pinpoint
but you
it.
Feel it.
But I know it's there. And so music is a blunt tool in lots of ways. You know, songwriting is a very blunt tool. You haven't got the kind of nuances that you might have if you're writing prose. You're tied to rhyme and you're tied to rhythm and all these sorts of things. And because of that, music is a very blunt tool. But when it kind of strikes the right chord, it's incredibly powerful. And 3 or 4 words kind of like sung with a certain melody can really be incredibly powerful, actually. So I'm always searching as a writer for those little moments of magic.
I mean, a Suede record is unmistakably a Suede record. Yeah. You know, I mean, you're very much still the rock band that you became famous for. Yeah. Although obviously there's variety and development along the way. But I mean, is that a conscious thing that you have to, we are basically doing 3 or 4 minute rock songs with choruses?
I think so. I think you become sort of like more conscious of your own identity, and I think we become, as you get older, you're able to sort of analyze that and able to pinpoint what it is that gives you something different from other bands. So kind of musically, there's things in the makeup of our music that we can kind of identify. There's a thing called the Suede chord, and the Suede chord is what we put in often at the end of a chorus or at the start of a chorus, and it's basically a chord that sort of takes it out of the key and it kind of shifts and it kind of like has a bit of a jolt. So there's like little musical devices we put in there that gives us our own sound. I suppose as well there's other things like, I mean, the nature of my voice, it's not, I don't have a kind of like a normal sort of like rock voice. It's a different kind of, the way I use it and stretch it and stuff like that is different. So yeah, I think you kind of, you just lean into it and you learn to sort of respect what's unique about you, I think.
Who created the Suede chord? What is it?
Suede chord? I don't really know. It's just something that kind of like came about and then we kind of realized it was there, Yeah.
And do you know when to use it?
I think so. Yeah. Maybe sometimes we overuse it, but it's a thing that's there in the Suede's makeup. Yeah.
And you mentioned your voice. I mean, like how? Because again, your voice sounds. It's got this very, very distinctive sound and very distinctive production.
Yeah.
On the records.
Yeah.
Is that difficult to maintain as you get older, or does your voice change?
Oh, I see what you mean. No, my voice, your voice does change. There's a tendency for people to sort of think that as you get older, you can't reach the notes, all that kind of thing. And that's not really true. When you're in the middle of a tour and you've been singing for 3 nights in a row, your voice gets a bit ragged. But my falsetto is still pretty good, and I think I can still reach the notes. And I kind of learn how to use it now. I learn on what part of the sort of register it's comfortable, and I can kind of like sort of lean into a kind of like more of a kind of sort of interesting baritone now, whereas before I wasn't really in control of that part of my voice. So you just sort of experience is a wonderful thing. It kind of like, it just teaches you how to learn to play your instrument. My instrument is my voice.
The new album is called Antidepressants.
Yeah.
Why?
It's a slightly cheeky title because it almost like the phrase antidepressants, excuse me, kind of refers to the 11 songs on the record. It's supposed to be like, you know, these 11 songs are the antidepressants kind of thing. So that's one level of the title. But also, I kind of wanted to sort of hint at and reflect the kind of like there's a sort of medicalization of society that I find fascinating. That kind of sense that the human condition is being turned into a prescription. And I kind of wanted to reflect some of that. I find certain phrases like something like personality disorder, that phrase is really interesting because personality disorder is basically can cover any sort of part of the range of being a human being. And
do you have any diagnoses yourself?
None that I'm willing to share. So I find the whole medicalization of the human condition really fascinating, and the sense of depression being something that you can cure with a pill is really interesting. And I think in lots of ways it's quite deluded. I think sadness and unhappiness and anxiety are just necessary parts of being a human being.
I mean, did you always feel that sort of need for antidepressant, if you like? Is that part of, you know, why you took drugs when you were younger and all that kind of stuff? Or?
Well, I don't know about that, but I think that there's different definitions of antidepressants. You know, that you can use music as my antidepressant in lots of ways. I'm still completely in love with music, and you have to be if you're pursuing a career sort of 30 plus years down the line, sort of thing. So music is an incredibly powerful thing for me, and I use it like I'd use a pill. I can wake up in the morning and I put a record on, and you know I go through the whole day listening to music, and it's a wonderful thing.
And how different is listening to music to writing music when it comes to your mental health?
Much easier to listen to music than writing music. I mean, we write a lot of songs, so we work very hard at what we do. So this new album, we've probably been writing it for about 3 years now. Every album takes at least two or 3 years to write. I know we throw a lot of songs away. We probably wrote 50 songs for this album and end up using about 10 of them. So it's about a 5-to-1 ratio kind of thing, 4-to-1 or whatever. My math isn't as good as it was.
What makes you throw them away? And what happens to the thrown away songs?
They just die. They just die, gasping, for air in the bag, sort of thing. They sometimes get reused. Rarely. I don't mind. I'm quite sort of ruthless. I'm not particularly sentimental for songs that don't get used.
So how do you judge? I mean, how do you decide that?
You just have to be objective. You just have to sort of like say, is this good enough? You know, I'm not kind of like, I don't over romanticize what I do. I'm kind of like, if a song's good, it'll be good because it's good, sort of thing.
That's just an instinctive feeling.
Yeah, it's an instinctive thing. And you learn how to judge that better as you get older, I think. You know, I think it's harder to judge when you're young. When you're young, as a band, you go through phases. You go through this phase of struggle where you can't really write songs, and suddenly you can write songs. And then you go through what's called the imperial phase, where basically everything that you write is kind of gold dust. And then you go through another phase where you think everything you write is gold dust, but it's not. And you kind of that's when the mistakes start happening. And then if you stick around long enough, you go through another phase where you're able to have kind of like real objectivity about your work. And we're at that stage now. So I kind of like I kind of think I know what the good stuff is.
So what is the gold dust phase then? What creates that?
I don't know.
It's just some weird alchemy.
I wish I knew. Yeah. It's experience. It's a bit of inspiration. It's a lot of perspiration as well.
What was your gold dust phase then?
Well, I mean, the Imperial phase with Suede is with every band. It's the early years. It's kind of like, for us, it was like the early 90s or whatever. That kind of period where everything you wrote was just, oh yeah, there's another great one. There's another great one. Didn't really have to think about it too much. And I think you're much more instinctive in those days. As you get older, you have to learn. You have to sort of learn it a bit more technically, and learn to be in control of your objectivity a bit more, I think.
Your background, your working class background, was always important to your writing.
Yeah.
And you've written about it in books as well.
Yeah.
In great detail. What is your class identity now, and how important is it?
What's my class identity? Well, I mean, class is such a weird thing to pinpoint, isn't it? It's so hard, that all the myriad of things that go to make up class. It's so hard to really identify. I think of myself as working class because that's how I was born. I was born to a very poor family. My father was a taxi driver. We lived in a little council house in Sussex. But it was an unusual upbringing because it wasn't a conventional working class upbringing. We didn't live in a tower block in Hackney. We didn't live in a mining town in the north of England. It was a sort of a council estate on the edge of a sort of Sussex village. So it's a weird kind of thing.
Yeah, and Linfield's really nice. I've cycled through it a few times.
It's lovely, but not the bit I lived in, you know. So, and my mum and dad were very cultured. So my father was a taxi driver, but he was a classical music obsessive. Not just a fan. He used to go to Franz Liszt's birthplace every year and, pay homage to Franz Liszt, this sort of thing. And my mother was an artist. So the house, even though there was no money, we were sort of like financially poor but culturally rich. And I was exposed to lots of arts, and my sister became an artist, and all these sorts of things. So it's a weird kind of contradiction of things that go to my upbringing. So I think of myself as working class, but obviously the values that my family had weren't working class, or not conventionally working class.
How do you feel? During Suede's sort of emergence and sort of initial stardom, we were in a period of Britain in which, people wanted class to disappear.
Yeah.
There was great social progress. We were, gay rights, anti-racism, all of these things were kind of like on the march.
Yeah.
And we were heading towards some sort of weird classless society in which everyone would be middle class.
Mm.
That was sort of arrested development, wasn't it, shortly after that? And if you look at where we are now, the broken people we are now, class seems sort of important again. It's the thing that defines a lot of our culture wars, our politics.
Yeah. Well, I think people are always looking for identity, aren't they? Everyone's always looking for to sort of like be part of a tribe, and that's what happens in politics, and that's what happens with religion. That's what happens with music as well. And I think that's one of the reasons that the music is still such an incredibly, live music especially, is such a powerful force, because it gives people a forum to identify with groups of people. Also, the other interesting thing about live music is I think that it gives people a space to let go. I think that's really important. I think society now feels... There's a sense of suppression about society that I feel. I feel as though as a citizen of the 21st century, you're being issued with commands. You get on the train and you're being told to see it, say it, sorted. You put your headphones on, you're saying disconnected, connected. It's this sort of series of commands you've been issued. And that sense you lose when you're in a gig and when you're experiencing live music, because you can kind of like you let yourself go and become primal again, but within a sort of a kind of safe framework in a way. You can kind of like, you can become the sort of the mad, sort of animalistic sort of version of yourself that you're only allowed to within a gig, and then kind of.
And it is tribal. You're with a bunch of people who feel the same way.
Yeah, exactly. With a group of people, and that's that search for identity, and that's what that sort of thing. I guess when people were sitting around a campfire, 40,000 years ago, and there was kind of like saber-toothed tigers, kind of like circling them and stuff like that, and they were sort of singing songs and there was the same kind of thing. It's that search for that kind of like identity. So
how do you feel about this Britpop revival this summer with all these huge gigs and lots of live music and, and people enjoying themselves in a nostalgic way.
That's fine for them. With respect, it doesn't mean anything to me. Nostalgia has never meant anything to me. I'm never interested in what we did in the past. I'm interested in what we're doing in the future. With all due respect, that everyone has to get what they can out of these things, and that's absolutely fine. Totally respect that. For Suede, it's all about our next record. It's all about the latest thing we're doing. I love that about Suede. I love that sense of industry that we have. We work very hard. That's why we're sort of 10 albums in and still loving what we're doing, kind of thing. Nostalgia, yeah, fine. I'm proud of what we did in the 90s. Lots of other bands, they seem to just be going around in circles, doing the same thing that they did in the 90s. That's fine. Whatever, that's what they want to do. I don't have any criticism for that. I don't particularly want to do that.
I mean, do you enjoy being nostalgic about the music you love?
Yeah,
yourself?
I suppose so, of course, because there's a phase in your life, isn't there, where music, when you're 15, 16, that kind of age in your life, and those songs, they speak to you in a way that the songs will never speak to you again. And you will always be reminded of those times in your life through those songs. And so, of course, yeah, it's an incredibly powerful thing, of course.
So how will your live shows be different then to what what Oasis are doing and Cast and everyone else?
They'll be different because they'll have songs that are written in 2025 rather than songs that are written in 1995. Yeah, that's how they'll be different. Obviously, we still play old songs because there's certain old hits that you just have to play. And to be honest, things like Animal Nitrate, Beautiful Ones, these kind of songs, they're great songs to get the audience going, and we use them as tools in the set. They kind of like they get the crowd rabid, and I like hysteria in gigs. Hysteria is really important. I don't like gigs to be a kind of a sort of too intellectual an affair. It's got to be passionate. It's got to be animalistic.
How easy is it to be hysterical in the Southbank Centre then?
Well,
it's sort of a cultural.
Find out. Yeah,
there are seats and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, there are seats, but we've done quite a few seated venues on the last tour, and I always get the crowd to just come down the front, and I just get out of your seats, come down. It's got to be Suede gigs have got to be mad, and our fans know what to do, so hopefully it'll be okay.
And you do very loud and also quite quiet acoustic moments as well.
Yeah, I think live music is about those extremes. I think it's all about a barrage of noise and then kind of intimacy or something like that. It's all about those dynamics, I think.
Because what are you getting out of constantly writing? There are lots of people who say, well, look, you've got a canon of work.
Yeah.
You don't really need to be writing any new stuff. You can make a great living and have lots of fun and go out on stage and all the rest of it, playing what you've done. So what is it you get in terms of the kick or the stimulation or whatever it is from continuing to do new stuff?
It's just, I think a writer needs to write. It's as simple as that. You kind of like, when you're in a band, you're both a writer and a performer, and performing things they're both just as important as each other. But I couldn't just have one of those things. I need to create as well. And the search for the perfect song is a really addictive thing, actually. It's really that kind of like you're sort of like you're trying to capture this sort of elusive butterfly. But when you get it in your net and you get that chorus and you get that melody, there's no feeling like it.
And do you think people are sort of looking at your words now the way that
I hope so.
People used to? Well, the way you used to kind of have to, because you'd read the album.
Yeah.
And you'd see the lyrics on the album sleeve and all that kind of stuff, which is obviously not how people listen to music now.
Yeah.
So if you want to go and see what it is you're precisely saying, you've got to look it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you think people do?
I think they do. I mean, words in music fascinate me because I think there's certain bands that it doesn't really matter what the words are. The words are just acting as a sort of like almost like a sort of device for the singer to play his instrument almost, and that's fine. And there's lots of great music that isn't particularly literary. And then there's other bands that the words mean everything, it very much depends on the band. But I think we're sort of somewhere in between. I don't write sort of pieces of prose or poetry and then sort of like force music onto them. It's very much a kind of like a collaborative affair between the melody and the words. But words are very important to me. Finding the key, the mot juste, is a really wonderful thing. I spend a lot of time scribbling into my notebook, listening to phrases, stealing phrases from films and books and things like that, and ripping them off. And that's what art is. It's appropriation, isn't it? But you've got to be clever about it.
The beginning of this record sort of begins with human disintegration.
Yes.
Is that how you feel? Are you worried about being your age?
I think as you get older, I'm 58 now, and I think as you sort of like, I'm nearly 60, and you have to be aware of mortality, and you have to be aware of your own mortality. But I don't think that's necessarily a morbid thing. I think it's I treat sort of the sense of mortality in the same sense that a memento mori is used in art. So memento mori is it's as we know, it's a reminder of death, quite literally. But that reminder of death enables you to seize the moment and to live life to its full. And I think that's a really important attitude to have to life, that there's not much time left, but that's not a bad thing. Live life to the full, and that's one of the messages of the song, messages of the album, I suppose.
Do you think that brackets you in terms of who's going to be drawn to the music? Like, are you writing for your own generation now?
Am I writing for my own generation? No, I don't feel that sense that I am. I'm writing for myself, and that's projected onto people my age. I like to think that obviously I'm aware that most of our listeners are kind of my generation, maybe a little bit younger, but we also do attract quite a lot of younger people as well. So they obviously connect with it in a different way. But yeah, I think every band sort of has to inevitably writes for their own generation because they're writing for themselves. So
when you say you're writing for yourself, what do you mean? Do you mean literally you're writing for yourself?
No, I mean that you reflect, you kind of use yourself as a sounding board to explore parts of the human condition. So when you're a young writer in your 20s, you're writing about sort of being a 20-year-old man. It would be really sad if I was still trying to write about being a 20-year-old man in my 50s. So I try and write about the things that concern me now as a 58-year-old man. So I write about, I think you've always got, songwriting is about accessing passion. And when you're young, that passion is sort of things like, oh, my girlfriend's just left me, and oh, I feel a bit lonely, and all these sorts of things, And when you get older, my passions are things like my family, right? So it's a completely different sort of passion, obviously, but
it's a very different kind of passion, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's
because you might just find yourself writing about your irritating children.
Yeah,
or
exactly. Yeah. So I write about my family a lot. I write, there's songs about my son that I write because these things obsess me. Because that's that's where I find real passion, and I write about the fragility of family as well, the kind of like the paranoia of family. I think there's a tendency for people to sort of see that writing about one's family is a kind of like a cozy affair, and that you always have to write about a family in a kind of nice cozy sense. And I like to look for the darker elements of family life. I never look for them in my day-to-day as a husband and a father. I never let that into my train of thought. But as a writer, I think that's a really interesting place to find.
I've seen you sort of talking about as a writer, kind of putting yourself in different perspectives.
Yeah.
And is that your sort of your kick, if you like?
Yeah, I think just sort of looking at the world through different eyes. Yeah, I've always tried to do that from the very early days. I also put myself in different people's, if they come from different perspectives. Some of the songs are about me, but from other people's points of view. I think that kind of keeps it fresh and it keeps it interesting, and it also I think keeps it fluid. I think keeping songs interesting. Songs are interesting when you don't quite know what they're about. As soon as I personally know what a song's about, I get a bit bored of it sometimes. I find that it's not interesting to me. I like it when I work out 20 years later what my songs are about. you know, and sometimes they do reveal themselves to me very slowly.
Which ones have surprised you?
Well, there's a song on the debut album called The Next Life, and I didn't really realize it was about my mother until quite recently. And, you know, and these songs, that they've got these different, they reveal themselves over a long period of time.
Just explain that. I mean,
well, it's a song about loss, but it's specifically about my mother. So, you know, I don't know.
But wasn't consciously.
No, I think the subconscious it plays a huge part in all art. I use my subconscious quite consciously. That's not a contradiction. When I'm writing, I'm kind of working away on a song, and I've got a chorus, and I'm looking for a melody in the verse, and I'm trying for a few hours and I can't quite get it. What I'll do is I'll go away and I'll just switch off for a bit, and I'll go and have a sandwich or go for a walk, and let your subconscious work on the record, try and solve the puzzle. And it often does. You often come back and got it. Yeah. So the subconscious is a great tool.
And if you got a lot better at sort of being discerning about your work now, do you also then judge your early work more harshly and go, you know, how did that make it?
Yes, I think I can be quite critical of.
Do you go off things?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of stuff that we did in the early days that I wouldn't do again. I'm always looking at early albums and thinking, God, why did we put that song on there? You know what I mean? It's odd. But you have to remember that you do these things because you're a different person. You know, it's a very different me that made those decisions. And also the other thing to remember is that I think people like things not despite their flaws, but because of their flaws sometimes. The flaws give things kind of like character.
You've described Broken Music for Broken People as a film, well, a little bit of 1984 in there.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
There's a phrase in 1984 when Winston is kind of yearning for some sort of kind of uprising in society, and he says, if there's hope, it lies with the proles. And I suppose, and the phrase "broken music for broken people," it reminded me of that.
Do you think that's true?
Do I think
if there's hope, it lies with the proles?
I don't know. It's a novel. I'm not sure if I want to kind of like tread there. It feels a bit, red hot sort of talking about that. I'd rather not go there. I think slogans can be really powerful in pop music, and that was just a slogan that I came up with.
Yeah.
It didn't really have a narrative. It suggested a world. It suggested a kind of like, I suppose I'm kind of always writing about my background a little bit, like we were saying earlier, I come from a sort of an underprivileged background, and I'm always trying to find a pride in that, I suppose, and Broken Music for Broken People sort of spoke to that.
Do you want to deliberately avoid politics?
No, I don't want to deliberately avoid politics, but I think it's become increasingly tribal and increasingly toxic, and it's very difficult to talk about.
Because the funny thing is that Dancing with the Europeans, which is one of your releases, sounds instantly political.
It does, and I was aware that it probably would. Lots of people would think it was some sort of anti-Brexit song or something like that, and it wasn't intended like that. It's meant as a song. It's a song seeking connection. It was inspired by a concert we did in Spain, where there was just an amazing connection in the room. So it's a song about kind of breaking down barriers in lots of ways, I suppose. But, people can sort of like interpret songs however they want to. I think that's the beautiful thing about songs, and that's the beautiful thing about art in a broader sense, is that it doesn't belong to the artist. It belongs to the interpreter. It belongs to the audience. Art asks a question and the audience answers it. And I think that's an incredible thing. The audience always brings a new element to the art. And something like that is a perfect example. If people want to think it's about something like that, they're perfectly welcome to.
If you could change the world in any way, how would you change it?
If I could change the world in any way, I've thought about this. I think one of the things, if I could wave a magic wand, I would uninvent social media. I think social media is responsible for many ills in 21st century life. I think that the way that it polarizes people, the way that it tribalizes people. Tribalizes, is that a word? Probably. It is now. The way that tribalizes people, turns people into tribes. Yeah, I think it's toxic. And I think it means that lots of people are living in very different realities. And it worries me that those realities won't be able to be resolved.
Is that, I mean, because obviously, you know, the supposed upside to social media is creating connections, and yet we seem very disconnected.
Yeah, I think what it does is it creates connections within sort of siloed groups, so that people find their tribes. And I suppose as a kind of musician that kind of likes tribalism within music, that sounds like a contradiction. I think it's fine for pop music to find, for pop musicians to find tribes. You know, the music I used to like as a kid, it was very tribal, you know, punk, heavy metal, all these sorts of things. But as a society, it kind of worries me that we seem to be splitting off into these ever more fractured groups. So yeah, I think in lots of ways people find connection through it, but it also means that there's lots of division as well.
And is that partly what you mean by broken people?
I think so. Yeah, I think it is. I think it's. I sort of see lots of fracturing in life at the moment. Yeah.
You also though do try to be. I mean, you know, music is an antidepressant. It's therefore uplifting and happy. So how do you know, when you're looking at these sort of quite dystopian things in a lot of ways, how do you turn it to actually, we've got to feel great and we've got to turn the music up loud? And
yeah, well, I think that the two are a sort of, you know, in a symbiotic relationship. I think if you feel that kind of life is sometimes kicking you down, there's a sense of sort of defiance to that. Lots of the sort of sense of joy on the record is an expression of defiance. You know, I think that kind of, you know, people are yearning to be able to let go and be defiant these days.
And just finally, as a top tip, if you're listening to music all day as an antidepressant,
yes,
what are you listening to at the moment?
What do I listen to at the moment? Well, I listen to a lot of, in the morning, I've got a little record player in my house, and it's really interesting what sounds good on it's like an old dance set thing, like a mono thing. And really old sort of 60s folk records sound great on that. So I love playing Nick Drake and Joni Mitchell and things like that in the morning. And then later on, I always try and listen to new stuff as well. So there's new bands that I like. There's a band called New Dad that I really like. So I'm always looking for new stuff. I like things like Fontaines. I like things like Dry Cleaning, things like that. So there's lots of good new music out there. I think you've got to look harder for it, but it's out there, definitely.
Brett Anderson, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing your ways to change the world. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, you could give this a rating so that other people find the podcast on your podcast platform. You can watch all of these interviews on the Channel 4 News YouTube channel. Until next time, bye-bye.